So today in front of me, I have the Samsung Galaxy S8 and the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus. Now, this upgrade has been, it's been a little bit controversial in the terms that people don't think it's big enough of an upgrade. People with the S8 don't see anything new or any big specific change about the S9 that they can get on board with and be forced to upgrade or, feel the need to upgrade. And I think that Samsung, for the past couple of years, they've been a little bit more, they've slowed down the crazy innovation, crazy ideas, and they focused a little bit more on evolution and not revolution. They've stopped trying to do odd things that don't work, and they're focusing a lot more on things that they know work, and they're improving on that. And I don't think there's any issue with that. There's nothing wrong with it, and they're actually, heading in the right step, in my opinion. So one thing I actually am a little bit concerned about is that people don't think that the S9 Plus is a real upgrade. That's actually not true, because the S9 and S9 Plus have a lot of new features. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys what new features we have moving from the S8 to the S9 Plus. So all the features of the S8 have been carried over, and there have been a few added. So I'm going to be listing out all of those, and let's start off with the hardware. Now, one of the most obvious changes is the fingerprint scanner. So the fingerprint scanner placement has moved. Previously, this was the most unliked thing about this phone. The only real complaint people kept having with this was that the fingerprint scanner was in a very awkward position, and it just didn't work for a lot of people. Now, I found it, initially I was a little bit skeptic. I didn't like it, but I got used to it, and muscle memory, it kind of builds quickly, so it wasn't really that big of an issue. However, when I started using this phone, the S9 Plus, which is bigger than the S8, so I don't have the S8 Plus, I just have the S8. The S9 Plus is a lot bigger than it. However, it's so much easier to reach the fingerprint scanner on this. In fact, it's a lot easier than the S8. And that's because of the way the placement has changed. It's a lot lower. It sits a lot lower now, and it sits in a way where you actually don't hit the camera lens. So with the S8, you'd often hit the camera lens. You'd smudge it up with your fingerprints because that's where the fingerprint sensor was, and you kept, every time you unlock the phone, you use the fingerprint scanner, and unless you stopped using the scanner altogether, there was just no way that you were going to keep that camera clean. However, this new placement has really helped things out. And even though it doesn't look as symmetrical as it did before, I think this is a welcome change, and it looks a lot more in place and not as an afterthought as it looks in this case. So another change we see this year is that the frame of the phone is no longer using the glossy, the shiny material on the frame. We now have this 7000 series aluminum that was actually first used on the iPhone 6s Plus. And it's done in a matte finish. So if you guys, I don't know if you can see, but the way the light's reflecting, it doesn't really show it off. But this is a matte finish, and this is a shinier finish. I actually prefer the matte finish in this case because it's not going to scratch up like this one did. And it's kind of like if you guys have seen an older iPod, one with a metal back, whatever you do, those scratches are just going to accumulate, and you can't do anything about it. There's just a ton of micro abrasions everywhere, and that's the case with this S8's frame. It's just there's a ton of little scratches and abrasions that it just comes along with the use of this phone. Even if you had it in a case, it's going to start developing them. So this is a welcome change. I like the matte finish a lot more. I am a little bit skeptic. Let's see how much better it holds up in comparison to the S8. I'm sure it's going to do a lot better, but maybe even this might start scuffing, or it might even start losing color, as a lot of matte finished or these kind of finishes do after using them for a while. So continuing on to the physical changes. So the S9, not the S9 Plus, the S9 is actually shorter and narrower than the S8. So that's a very good change. The S9 Plus is just shorter than the S8 Plus. It is not narrower. I think it's the same size when it comes to the width of the phone. However, the S9 and S9 Plus are both thicker and heavier than the S8 and S8 Plus, and that's probably to accommodate all these new features that are in the phone without having to lose battery. So both of these phones actually do have the same battery capacity. The S8 and S9 have 3,000, S8 Plus, S9 Plus had 3,500. So that hasn't changed, but it makes sense why we haven't lost any weight this year. It's because we've gained features without losing the battery, which is usually the first thing to go when manufacturers start adding features. And moving on to some more changes about the phones themselves. So the S9 Plus variant now comes standard with 6 gigs of RAM. Previously, you had the option of jumping from a 64 to a 128 gig model, and the 128 gig model was the only one with the 6 gigs of RAM, and that wasn't available in all regions. Now, in every region, you will have the option to buy the 256 GB variant, and 6 GB comes standard regardless of what storage size you get. So now the S9 Plus has the 64, 128, and the 256 options. The S9, the smaller one, now has the 128 and 256 GB model variants. Previously, we only had the 264 GB on the smaller S8. Now you have the option of all three. So both of these phones have the same storage capacities. However, let it be noted that they are only available in midnight black. So if you choose a different color, you're stuck with the 64. But it's not that big of an issue because you do have an SD card slot and you can add your own storage. But if you do want that onboard storage, you're going to have to stick to the midnight black color. Moving on. One of the more welcome upgrades on the S9 Plus is the dual speakers. So one of my biggest complaints with the S8 and the Note 8 were that the speakers were not good, especially when it's compared to how good of a display it has. This thing should be a media powerhouse. It should, with the display it has, all I want to do is consume media on it. However, the thorn in its side was that it didn't have dual speakers. The one speaker it had, it was decent, but it wasn't loud, or the quality wasn't anything to brag about. It was just there for utility. There wasn't anything good about it. S9 Plus has fixed it. We have a dual stereo speaker, which is actually another change when it comes to physical design, is that now instead of having these little speaker grills, we just have one large cutout on the S9. So on the S8 and S8 Plus, we had these grill cutouts. The S9 just does with one complete cutout. Now, I'm not sure if this is the best idea in terms of, maybe a lint getting up in there, because now it's just a lot easier for bigger pieces of lint to get up in there. However, we'll see long term how it works out, and I'm not sure what my experience is going to be, but I just hope that the speakers don't get muffled due to the unnecessary, trash or lint getting in there, which is actually a real possibility, especially if you keep it in your pockets or something like that. Now, moving on, let's look at one of the major changes from the S8, S8 Plus to the S9 and S9 Plus, and that is the camera. So, off the bat, the S8 and S9 both have a single camera system. However, from the S8 Plus to the S9 Plus, you get this beautiful dual camera setup. Now, the secondary camera is right off the Note 8. There's no changes with that. However, the primary lens on both the S9 and S9 Plus, those have been upgraded for a dual fixed aperture option. So you can use a dual aperture on the primary lens of 1.5 and 2.4. This is a very cool option because it allows you a lot more flexibility when it comes to low light. So low light photography is vastly improved due to this dual fixed aperture. The 1.5 lets a lot more light in, and it really does help those low light photos to come to life. And continuing on to camera features, the S9 and S9 Plus have a new 960 frame per second slow-mo recording feature. Now, the S8 and S8 Plus do not have this feature. In fact, no other phone right now on the market has 960 frames per second. I'm fairly certain that's going to change very soon, as there's a lot of new phones coming out. But the S9 and S9 Plus were the first ones to do it, and they actually produced some really interesting results, and I'll be sharing a lot of those in further videos coming up. Then we have the SMARTSCAN. So now the S9 the S9 and S9 Plus use the front cameras a lot more uniquely and efficiently. So one of the bigger changes with those is that you can use intelligent scan, which is using the iris scanner that is built into the phone and the front camera to create a combination of an iris and a facial scan to create a smart scan. So what it does is usually it'll try to verify both, but say that the lighting condition is not correct or it's very low, you won't be stuck with not being able to unlock your phone with your face. You can use the iris scanner, or if your eyes are covered with sunglasses or something, and the iris scanner is not working, the camera will pick you up and the face recognition will kick in from there, which makes it, Samsung Samsung calls it the SMARTSCAN, and it is smart because it uses the two sensors to create a combination of unlock methods for you. The S8 does have facial unlocking and iris unlocking, but it doesn't allow you to do the SMARTSCAN. However, when it comes down to it, I still do use the fingerprint sensor a lot more, especially thanks to that newer location. Another thing, talking about the front cameras, another new feature for the S9 and S9 Plus is those AR emojis, the AR emojis or the R emojis or whatever you want to call them. They're the emojis that what it does is the camera looks at your face and creates an avatar of yourself, which it then creates into short GIFs that have reactions to them or something similar. And you can send out those GIFs or those stickers to your friends. Now, from what I've tested this out and what I've seen from other people, the facial tracking is not as good as the iPhone 10. And I think that's a little bit understandable because the S9 Plus and S9 don't have a complicated facial tracking system. They don't use a dot illuminator or a dot projector to project and to read your face, so it's a little bit harder for it to completely understand how your face is moving. It uses only the camera, and so far it's not doing the best of jobs. The iPhone 10s and emojis are definitely a lot nicer. So we also have an addition of a few more features on BIXBY Vision. So let me just show that to you very quickly. So when you open up BIXBY Vision, one of the key changes you'll have is, let me just unlock my phone here real quick, is that you'll see that the S9 and S9 Plus have a new interface. So on the S8, what would happen is that you would just have this blank screen and you would have to point it at a certain object and try to have it be read. Whereas the S9 Plus, you can choose the type of object you're pointing it out, so it takes out the guesswork and it immediately starts to scan objects. I've tried to mess with this a little bit. It's not the most, a reliable thing. It really doesn't do a lot. It doesn't work as well as they'd advertise it. It's more of a gimmick just to show off. I don't think a lot of people will be using it that much. However, it does come in handy, especially coming to translating them. And now the translate screen is a lot more apparent. On this, it's just not. You have to take a photo and hope that it picks up that the text, and it does that. The S9 Plus, the BIXBY Vision, is a lot nicer. And one of the absolute coolest features of the S9 Plus, in my opinion, has to be the multi-frame image processing. So what it does is it allows you to take, what it actually doesn't allow you, it does it itself. You don't need to do anything. What it does is it creates multiple images at once of the same frame, and it takes them all using different settings. So different exposure, different kind of that. And it'll piece everything together. It'll stitch across different pieces from different images to create one final image that looks really good. This is the same technology that the Pixel 2 uses. And it just, the photos come out really nice at the end of the day. And that's, the multi-frame thing is just amazing. And I really want to see more people do it. And this is actually supported because of the processor, which I'll talk about now. So the processor on the S9 and S9 Plus are upgraded from the S8 and S8 Plus, but that's kind of a standard now. Every phone, every new generation of a phone has a newer processor. So the Snapdragon 835 and the Exynos 8990, I believe, are what were on the S8 and S8 Plus. So there are two variants of it depending on what region you're in. The newer version, the newer S9 and S9 Plus, what they have is a Snapdragon 845 and an Exynos 9810. So the performance is vastly improved. Both are octa-core chipsets, but I believe the clock speed on this is a little bit higher, and the efficiency is a lot better. So it does make battery life a lot better in comparison to the S8 and S8 Plus. Moving on to the last change, that is because of these upgraded CPUs, we now have gigabit LTE support on the S9 and S9 Plus. So we get speeds up to 1.2 Gbps, which we previously did not have on the S8 and S8 Plus. Now that is because of this new chipset. The chipsets do allow further faster speeds on both downloads and uploads on cellular. So the Wi-Fi is still the same, so I'm fairly certain that Wi-Fi speeds are going to be largely unaffected. It's just cellular speeds are going to be significantly better on the S9 and S9 Plus. So wrapping things up, these are the changes that the S9 has over the S8, and what I think is that I'm actually happy with the way that these changes came about. Samsung fixed every issue that the S8 had, and the S9 is just a very good evolution over the S8. I'm actually happy they're not trying to push revolutionary new things all the time, because sometimes, you know, you need to slow down, look at what you've done, and fix some of the issues so you can move on and do bigger and better things. Now, I look forward to the next version of the Samsung flagships to have slightly better speakers, but as of now, I think that I'm just really happy with the way these phones perform, and I'm looking forward to what Samsung has in store for the future. Let me know what you guys think about the S8, S8 Plus, and S9, S9 Plus. If you were to buy a phone with your own money today, which one of these would you pick up and why? Let me know why you would pick up that particular phone. Now, one more thing I'd like to state is that if you do have an S8, I would not recommend the upgrade to the S9 Plus unless you A, want those dual speakers really bad, in which case, you know, the dual speakers aren't the best, so be warned about that, or you want the better camera. Now, the camera is definitely a worthy upgrade, so if you use your camera a lot, especially in low lighting settings, that would be a really good upgrade. And otherwise, hardware, it's largely unchanged. The display is the same, and all the other smaller things are largely untouched. So when it comes down to the end of the day, if you have an S7 or an S6, the S9 is a great upgrade. But if you're on the S8, I think that you can wait a year and pick up the next phone, or just wait for the new Note and see if you like that one over this. And if you don't, the S9 will probably be on a large discount by that time. So it's a win-win, and I think that that's about it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.